I want to talk today about addiction as a learning disorder. And the reason I decided that this is probably the best way to frame it is because for a really long time we've tried to destigmatize addiction in the context of addiction being basically criminalized and 80% of the treatment being made up of the 12 steps, which involve surrender to a higher power, confession, restitution, and prayer. Now, if you went to a doctor for any other disease and you were told that the treatment was confession, meeting, and prayer, you would probably think that you went to a quack. And so people very correctly, when they hear people making the argument that addiction's a disease and the treatment is either punishment or prayer, assume that you're lying about its being a disease, or assume that you have some kind of weird something going on where you are your actions aren't matching your words. And so while I absolutely think addiction is a health and medical problem and not a choice, understanding what type of medical problem it is without all the baggage of the D word, I think can be very useful, especially to activists. And of course, I'm sure everyone in this room knows that the vast majority of people who use drugs do not become addicted. That only, even with drugs like heroin, only 15 to 20% become addicted. We obviously should care about the health of all drug users, but especially when harm is involved, that's what has been used to justify the war on drugs, the fact that there can be addiction and there can be overdose and there can be harm. So we need to understand better ways to deal with addiction, and I'm arguing that seeing it as a learning disorder is the way that will allow us to get past this it's a disease, it's a sin, it's a crime debates that we continue to have and have had for about 100 years. So why would you see addiction as a learning disorder? Well, basically, addiction can't happen without learning. You have to learn that the drug fixes something for you, either makes you feel euphoric, makes you feel comfortable, makes you feel safe. It does something for you, and you associate whatever that is with the drug. This is why babies can't actually be addicted, because while babies can suffer physical dependence on drugs like opioids, and they will have withdrawal symptoms, a baby just feels discomfort, and it doesn't know if it needs the diaper change, or mommy, or milk, or heroin. And it certainly a baby cannot go out and buy drugs and use them despite negative consequences, which is, you're going to see the baby crawling off to the dealer. It's just not going to happen. It's not only stigmatizing, and in the era of crack did horrible harm to people who got the label crack baby, it is inaccurate. And it's based on this very old conception of addiction, which was the idea that addiction is physically needing a substance to function. And if that was addiction, well, we'd all be food, water, and air addicts. And I would be addicted to my Prozac, because if I stop taking Prozac, I become depressed again. I'm not out robbing drugstores. I'm not sitting around thinking, oh man, when can I get my next Prozac? It's not a drug like that, as probably people here who have taken antidepressants will know. You don't associate the drug with fixing you. It takes 2 weeks to work, for one. But anyway, that sort of misconceived idea that addiction is physical dependence led to this really weird situation where cocaine was not considered addictive. And when I was in college at Columbia, cocaine was not considered addictive. And this was right before crack. Scientific American said that the cocaine's as addictive as potato chips. Of course, this is funny now, because now we're saying potato chips are as addictive as cocaine. But at that time, that was seen as, potato chips, no worries. But now, of course, we recognize that addiction has to be compulsive behavior despite negative consequences. It can't just be physically needing something. And so that definition, you have to learn the compulsive behavior and you have to persist despite the consequences. And this brings up something very interesting in regards to policy. Because if addiction is defined as compulsive behavior despite negative consequences, and negative consequences is basically a phrase that means punishment, how on earth is punishment going to stop addiction? Because if punishment stopped addiction, addiction wouldn't exist if it's compulsive behavior despite punishment.